What if Daenerys drank the poisoned wine? Let's explore the depths of it in the video.
Lachi, Khaleesi sen? Mahakola mesik don don jalnak. At Lachi, Mahaka Ashaki, Haka Sahon.
My son already has his name, but I'll try your summer wine. Just a taste.
My lady, you are from Westeros.
You have the honor of addressing Daenerys of the House Targaryen, Khaleesi of the Riding Men, and Princess of the Seven Kingdoms.
Princess.
Rise. I'd still like to taste that wine.
That? Dornish swill, not worthy of a princess. I have a dry red from the arbor. Nectar of the gods. Let me give you a cask. A gift.
You honor me, sir.
Daenerys laughs as she watches the wine seller rifle through his casks for the promised wine. She stands there patiently, unaware of the trouble brewing. Eventually, the wine merchant returns, bearing a cup of fine red wine, as red as blood and as rich as gold. The queen inhales deeply, smelling the juicy arbor grapes. She thanks the merchant for his generosity and raises the glass. Jorah Mormont spots this and frowns, gripping his sword tightly, and begins to approach. But it is too late as Daenerys takes a sip of it. His heart leaps into his chest as he watches the Khaleesi's reaction, but to his surprise, she seems fine.
Well, I doubt I'll be naming my firstborn son after you. I must say that was indeed refreshing.
The wine seller laughs, and Daenerys bids him goodbye as she marches off, the rest of them in tow. Jorah continues to keep his eye on the young queen, observing her for any changes for the rest of their trip. At first, things seem normal, and she goes about her business without issue, but the poison is slow acting. First, she feels lightheaded, and it is easy to attribute it to her pregnancy and the heat. Yet when they lay her down in her tent to rest, she does not recover. If anything, her condition worsens as a fever breaks out. Though the Dothraki healers and the slaves do everything they can, there is little hope as Daenerys succumbs to the poison, and with it, the stallion who mounts the world. The Khal is livid at the loss of his wife, and he is left in a fury. He orders the wine seller to be captured and brought before him, where he is executed, but only after he reveals why he did it. Robert Baratheon was offering a rich reward, lordships, and a castle to whomever slays the usurper queen and her babe. This brings a change in the Khal, who initially had little ambition for the Seven Kingdoms, but now he is thrown into a rage and vows vengeance against King Robert. To help him with that, Ser Jorah Mormont is brought before him and kneels.
Khal Drogo, allow me to offer my most sincere apologies. I should have anticipated something like this. The usurper would never rest easy on his throne, knowing a Targaryen still lives. Please, I beg your forgiveness.
The great Khal says that forgiveness can only be won on the battlefield. I have done no wrong to this usurper, and yet he attacks me when I go about my business. Claims my wife's head and that of my unborn son.
Indeed. That is the nature of this rebellion. A cruel act run by wicked and cruel men. I had once served King Robert and his Dark Lord Eddard. Both men are hypocrites who hide behind notions of honor.
If you know them, then you can help me punish them. To attack a Khal and try to escape punishment is the height of foolishness. I cannot let such an act go unpunished. I wish to slaughter their men and enslave their women and children, but for that I require help. You said it yourself. You have ridden amongst them and served alongside this king. Tell me everything you know. Serve as my guide, and I shall have you rewarded.
If that is what the Khal desires,
I will give my price. I wish to return home to Bear Island. I wish for that land to be made mine again, and for its people to see me as their lord. Aside from that, I wish for more lands, enough that I do not die in poverty, that I should marry. I shall never want for wealth. Help me take the Seven Kingdoms, and it shall be yours and more.
Jorah smiles, and the Khalasar soon turns westward, marching back the way it came to the Free Cities, where they hope to charter ships to take them to the Seven Kingdoms. Khal Drogo has much wealth and many slaves to sell. This is more than enough to buy him a fleet. They soon return to Pentos, where Illyrio Mopentis welcomes them as guests. He feasts with them and lavishes them with gifts for their journey westward. But during one such dinner, he asks Jorah to dine with him.
You have a great task ahead of you, Lord Mormont.
The cowl lacks knights to guide him and interpreters to teach him the ways of the Seven Kingdoms. Tell me, how does he plan on ruling without either of those? He does not. Ruling is not his goal. It is conquest and punishment for those who have wronged him. Really now? Then tell me, do you think Daenerys would be pleased to hear that? Her heart was always gentle, and she never cared for the suffering of other people. Do you think she would be pleased with this invasion? She had pushed for it in the first place, to put her son on the throne. A son who is no longer among us. No, she would not care for a senseless war like this. Not unless we gave it sense. What are you getting at? Viserys often believed that the Seven Kingdoms would rise up if he returned. Houses like the Dornish, Tyrells, and Daenerys would rally to his cause, and certainly not without reason. But that requires a dragon, not a stallion. If you and your horse lords pulled up on the shores, they would unite and drive you back. Even Robert's foes would rally to his side. Then what do you propose? A dragon? There is still one left. One that I have kept hidden for some time. A dragon? No. That is impossible. They all died in the sack of King's Landing. That is precisely why I kept him hidden. No, I have been in this world for many years, and I have learned to always be prepared for emergencies like this. True, Lady Elia and her daughter had tragically passed, but the boy, Aegon, he lives. I had made sure of it.
To prove his point, Illyrio rings a bell at the side of his desk, and the doors open, revealing a gray-bearded man with a surcoat of House Connington. Beside him is a young man with deep blue hair and bright blue eyes. But what gets Jorah's attention is the boy's demeanor. There is a regalness about him, instilled in him from a young age. He stands tall, his expression proud and commanding, and he bears the brooch of House Targaryen. And then there is his age. He would be the same age as Aegon VI now.
Sir Jorah, allow me to introduce you to Sir Jon Connington and Aegon VI, the only son of Rhaegar. How can that be?
Why? The same reason you are here now. Because of loss. Because you loved the dragons as I did long ago.
Then you will know how my tale ended. There is no place for me in this new regime. I have no one to fight for. My love is dead.
It does not change anything, Sir Jorah. Though Daenerys may no longer be among us, she has left us a task, and we would be dishonoring it by leaving it unfinished. What better way could there be to honor her than by putting her nephew on the Iron Throne? The boy who should have inherited it long ago.
That certainly is an ambitious plan. But do you truly believe it can be done? With the Dothraki and the troops I have gathered, it is certainly possible. All we require of you is to convince Khal Drogo.
This turns out to be much easier than expected, as although Khal Drogo has little regard for the Westerosi knights, he certainly won't turn down 10,000 men freely given, much less men who speak their language, know the land, and understand the customs of the Seven Kingdoms. Once Jorah explains that Aegon is Daenerys' nephew, he agrees to let him keep the Iron Throne. The only thing Drogo wants is the pleasure of killing King Robert, something Aegon happily agrees to. With that agreed to, Illyrio wastes no time in organizing a fleet to transport them across the Narrow Sea. He reaches out to Varys, who informs him of when to sail, as Robert plans to go hunting soon, leaving an opportunity to cause chaos. Even better is that there are disputes between houses Lannister and Tully, with Lannister raiders striking into the Riverlands, where there are even rumors that Tywin plans on invading the Riverlands in retaliation for kidnapping his son, Tyrion. They make their landfall close to Crackclaw Point, which is unlikely to report any activity due to the animosity between the Crown and the Crackclaw houses. Soon enough, the hooves of 1,000 Dothraki scream across the soft earth, tearing through forests and fields alike. By nightfall, they reach the nearest villages and farms, which are defenseless. Before the sun even reaches its peak, smoke curls from the ground to reach out and grab it. The Dothraki rush forward, their curved rocks flashing as the hapless villagers scramble to escape or put up a feeble resistance. Whatever they intend, it fails as they trample crude palisades and scatter terrified small folk. Some flee, others kneel, the rest are cut down. No mercy is shown. Within hours, the Crownlands echo with fire and terror. Small folk flee among muddy roads, crying of demons on horseback. Many who flee are cut down, unable to outrun them, but those who do manage to escape send warnings to the local lords. Duskendale closes its gates and port, but other lords begin forming militias and levies to meet them. The hastily assembled militia offers token resistance: old men, boys with sharpened farm tools, retired guardsmen, and a handful of lesser knights as more forces gather further south. They are swept aside like chaff before the storm. Spears shatter, shields splinter, blood soaks the earth. By the second day, the Dothraki are fanning out, splitting their Khalasar into dozens of fast-moving wings. Each moves independently, hitting towns and holdfasts without warning. The castle of So's Horn is placed under siege by noon, its gates barred, its garrison already bleeding. Meanwhile, Rosby is laid low, and Hayford surrenders. By evening, the fires rise over its walls, signaling the beginning of a slow, brutal fall. In King's Landing, Ned Stark takes command of the city, bringing in as many refugees as he can while strengthening the walls and preparing the army for war. Further south, near the Dornish marches, word spreads like wildfire. Horns blow from tower to tower. Ravens are dispatched in every direction. Lords and landed knights scramble to respond, some still rubbing sleep from their eyes. War banners are dragged out from old chests, and armor is hastily polished. The Stormlands are no strangers to violence, but the reports paint an almost apocalyptic vision. The lords begin to muster their levies, calling bannermen, lighting the beacons. Sir Bryce Caron rides day and night to Tarth. House Fell digs into Fellwood, preparing for the worst. Lords Eastermont, Selmy, and Dondarrion begin assembling their hosts. They know the Dothraki will not stop. And, most importantly, all the houses send their swiftest riders to King Baratheon. At the time, the king is in the Kingswood, hunting. Or rather, he was. The first rider arrives at his hunting lodge near the Windwater. His face turns redder than his wine-soaked cheeks. He curses the trees, the gods, and every Targaryen ever born. This is exactly the type of thing that he had hoped to avoid. Tossing his goblet in the fire, he abandons the hunt at once. His counselors beg caution. Riding through the Crownlands would be suicide. So he listens. Robert boards a war galley at Storm's End that same night, cutting across Blackwater Bay toward King's Landing. He stares out over the sea, gripping the hilt of his spear. His voice is low but firm as he growls to Sir Barristan beside him.
They brought war to my shores, Selmy. I'll return the favor with their heads.
The drums of war beat louder with every tide. But as he returns to King's Landing, Ned greets him with even more grim reports of the growing success of the Dothraki. The only hope is that Renly is bringing up the Stormlanders for a counterattack. In the meantime, they must hold out as long as possible. Unfortunately, the situation in the Crownlands is not going well. The larger houses are being defeated one by one as they try to face the Dothraki alone. Their numbers are few, and there are not enough knights and longbowmen, mostly just levies and men-at-arms. And here, the reports get even stronger. Aside from the Dothraki, there are now reports of other fighters riding under the three-headed dragon banner. Aside from the horsemen, they also hear reports of disciplined armies of foot soldiers in golden mail and plate. They bear a sigil of golden skulls and are accompanied by heavy horses and knights. The Golden Company. While not as swift-moving and destructive as the Dothraki, they make up for it through their discipline. In castles that are too fortified for the horsemen to take, the Golden Company, under John Connington, takes command. They surround the castles and use careful siege work and disciplined strikes to break through their attacks. They are aided by Ser Jorah, who continues to feed the Dothraki information, telling them of the strengths of different houses and where to strike. Ned tries to organize them as best they can, but this is a losing battle, and the flat terrain makes it foolish to give battle even when they wish. Robert roars in frustration, wanting to go out and fight. The more reports he hears of burned-out farms and ruined villages, the more Robert wishes to ride against them. But Ned pulls him back and reminds him that this is precisely what they want, to lure the army and the king out and take him out in a single swoop. Robert is furious about this and continues to scream in frustration, but Sir Barristan and Ned convince him to stay his hammer. Instead, they send out word to the other great houses to mobilize all their strength in order to prepare for war. Though he cannot fight, Robert instead focuses on using his tactical abilities to help. He sends out word to the surrounding houses, advising them on what to do. For some, he tells them to hold out if he believes they can. For others, he urges them to evacuate to places where they can hide, and the Dothraki will have a hard time pursuing them. These words prove to be smart. As though he might not be the warrior he once was, Robert still has his military mind and effectively directs several successful actions to save hundreds of lives. At the same time, he takes command of the defenses, gathering as many as he can: sellswords, gold cloaks, and anyone else able and willing to carry a spear. These are drilled to become proper soldiers and ready to defend the walls as he receives word of Renly's approach. Soon enough, he gets word that the army is mobilizing from the Stormlands and will only be several days away. But before that, he receives other words of refugees from Stokeworth, hurrying to try and escape the carnage of war. But scouts report a large Dothraki raiding force in hot pursuit. This battle is so close that Robert can sometimes see hints of people in the distance while patrolling the walls. He spends hours gripping the crenellations as he waits for them to arrive, but soon his impatience gets the better of him. Before he realizes what's happening, Robert is saddling his horse and mounting up for battle. Accompanying him are 400 picked men of the Gold Cloaks, sellswords, and a handful of knights and men-at-arms, including Sir Barristan and Sir Balon. They soon rush in the direction of Stokeworth, trying to save the refugees. They arrive just in time, as they see a mob of people stumbling away. They try to make their escape, but behind them is the unmistakable sound of Dothraki. They whoop and raise their swords and whips. Robert splits his unit into 3, taking the center force with 200 riders to strike. The others break off under the command of Sir Barristan and Balon. As Robert approaches, he has his banners raised high in defiance to the Dothraki, roaring a challenge at them. The screamers respond with their own battle cries as they gallop to face him. Arrows arc overhead and try to cut him down. A few of the knights falter, struck in vital spots or having their horses killed from under them. Robert nearly joins him, but his closest companions raise their shields above his head to keep him close. As they approach, the Dothraki suddenly break off, forcing Robert to go after them. However, this is where the other 2 columns strike. They perform a deep flanking maneuver to surround the Dothraki behind the hill. They strike while the Horse Lords are committed to Robert's force, striking from the side. Sir Barristan lets out a battle cry as his sword flashes overhead, slicing left and right to cut through unarmored Dothraki, while Sir Balon drives his lance through the captain's chest. Seeing their king riding to save them, the small folk feel their spirits lifted, and many redouble their efforts to escape. Soon enough, they manage to make it clear from the battlefield and escape into King's Landing. Seeing that, Robert roars and sweeps his warhammer and knocks the last few Dothraki blocking his path off their horses. The rest of his men press forward and cut their foes down, leaving the few survivors to break off and escape to their master. Although not a major victory, it is a huge morale boost to the Iron Throne. Not only did they save hundreds of people, they also managed to defeat a sizable Dothraki raiding party. It isn't much, but it does shatter the myth of their invincibility. Ned is less than pleased to see Robert risking his life, but is relieved nonetheless by seeing him safe and the refugees alive. Even better news is that Renly is at last approaching and reinforced by Stannis. This is the first major army to confront the Targaryen invaders, and they move cautiously to engage them. Jon Connington sees the army as well, and knows that he cannot ignore them lest they risk losing the ground they have gained, so proposes dividing their forces, with Drogo and most of his Khalasar moving to attack the Riverlands, while a portion of their forces remain to assist Jon in securing the Crownlands and pushing into the Stormlands. Drogo takes 3/4 of his Dothraki, leaving the rest with Jon, who has most of the Golden Company and a force of defecting Westerosi knights. The battle soon takes place just beyond the Blackwater Rush, where Stannis and Renly command 18,000 men. Stannis takes command of the main force, and rather than rush to engage them, digs in for a defensive battle. Stakes are planted in the front of his army line, and beyond that are caltrops and a long trench. Soon enough, the Dothraki come rushing along with their allies. Jon Connington sends the Horse Lords to fire upon them in a series of strafing strikes, but this time they are met with walls of shields, followed by return fire from much larger longbows. The archery duel lasts for nearly an hour, but the entrenched Marcher Lords get the better of them. This time the Horse Lords try to rush forward, supported by levies from the Crownlands they forcibly conscripted. However, they struggle to get over the trenches. Some horses leap over them while others climb through, or march through prepared gaps in the trench, which are turned into killing fields. No matter where they pass through, they are met with a wall of pikes and arrows raining down upon them. They make little progress, and soon enough, Jon pulls these levies back and orders the Dothraki to pull back as well. In there, Jon Connington sends the infantry, levies drawn from the Crownlands, and pushes against them. This time, they have an easier time, thanks to the ditches being filled up with corpses, and soon they come to blows with the Stormlanders. They fare better than the unarmored Dothraki, hacking at their pikes and jabbing with their own polearms. It is a ferocious clash, and they are supported in the rear by Crackclaw men, who sling stones and are stiffened by the Golden Company, who manage to batter the Stormlander army and begin to drive them back. For a moment, it seems like they might break through, and at last Jon Connington sends the rest of his force, focusing it all in a single clash. But once the entire army is committed, horns blare from the hedges and hills where Renly is waiting with an ambush force. It is not large, but the cavalry strikes hard, slamming into their flanks. With the Dothraki already committed, it is difficult for them to maneuver away, and for once they encounter cavalry they cannot compete with. The Stormlander army easily sweeps them aside, and Jon Connington feels his army on the verge of collapse. In desperation, he calls for his elephants and sends them forward. The beasts rush in and manage to blow a hole in Renly's pikemen, letting Jon and a part of his army escape in the Stormlands, while others scatter back to the Crownlands. He takes his remaining force and rides further south, aiming to retake his home and cause some trouble in the region. Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, Khal Drogo begins to realize how difficult this planned conquest could be. Jorah guides them to the Riverlands along with guides from Crackclaw Point, but they are aided by Varys, who sends word ahead of their arrival. He also talks about the story of Daenerys and how Robert cruelly ordered the assassination of a child because he feared what they might do. This is what brought down the wrath of the Dothraki upon them. This causes many loyal Targaryen houses like houses Derry, Mooten, Goodbrook, and Rhaegar to rally to their side. Others like houses Went and Cox simply surrender and open their gates to them. They add their strength to the Dothraki. But even with these troops, the enemy army isn't the problem. It is the terrain. True to its name, the Khalasar cannot march a few leagues without encountering rivers and fjords of some kind, and these become the ideal ambush spots for the Riverlords. Like the Crownlanders, they do not fight as a unified army, but they are not nearly as helpless. In the Riverlands, they are roving bands of raiders and guerrillas. Though the defectors provide some guides, the Blackfish and other Riverlords know this land like the back of their hand, and ambushes and raids become all too common. They know fighting the Dothraki in an open field is suicide, so instead bite at their heels, striking in towns that the Dothraki capture to deprave them of secure bases. Even more strangely, Tywin mobilizes his army, but begins attacking the Dothraki who venture too far west. He seizes several border castles from the houses Smallwood, Piper, and Vances. He does this to protect the small folk and prevent the castles from falling. At the same time, he also uses these regions as buffer zones, preventing the Dothraki from capturing them and raiding into the Westerlands. Though Harrenhal continues to remain under their control, the Dothraki struggle to hold onto territory, and to make matters worse, Robert issues a call to arms. While his troops are hunting Jon Connington, the Reach, Riverlands, North, and Westerlands are all gathering troops to finish them off. This forces them to halt their attack and reconsider their position. To help them, Varys makes use of his spies to try and turn the houses against them. Although they might be united by a common foe, old hatreds and fresh wounds bubble just beneath the surface. The first of these mention how Robert is responsible for this war because of his aggression against the Dothraki by having Daenerys murdered. It isn't just the pro-Targaryen houses who are horrified. Many honorable lords are shocked to hear this. Even Ned is shaken by it. He had insisted that Robert reconsider and try to steer the king from the path, but failed. Now a part of him cannot help but feel resentful about this. In the shadowed depths of the Red Keep, beneath the Tower of the Hand, where war is planned by candlelight, Varys meets in silence with his little birds. Children, servants, washerwomen, and forgotten men gather in the gloom, their eyes wide, their ears open. He walks among them, soft as silk, voice gentle as a breeze.
Truth is a blade, but a lie a net. And we are in need of many nets.
He hands out sealed scrolls, letters to be slipped into the right hands, rumors to be whispered in the right ears. One bird is sent to Sunspear with tales of Robert's inaction after Elia Martell's murder, another to Riverrun, bearing a copy of an intercepted raven that reveals the enormity of the crown's debts to House Lannister, debts now hamstringing the realm's defenses. Others are to the Valemen and Reachfolk about the investigation of Jon Arryn and Stannis of Cersei's infidelity. While there is nothing ironclad, it certainly raises some doubts, and possibly some opportunities.
Tell Lord Hoster that his soldiers go unpaid because the king must borrow from the lions to feed his dogs.
To the Westerlands, Varys sends couriers with tales of Tyrion Lannister's abduction by Catelyn Stark. He frames it not as justice, but as the first act of a northern rebellion. how they see themselves as above the law because Ned is now Hand of the King, how Stark overreaches, kidnaps a lion, and still Robert calls it duty. Whispers spread like wildfire. In the north, he has tales brought of how Jaime attacked Ned in broad daylight with multiple witnesses, how he butchered the Stark guards and left Ned nearly crippled before scurrying off to the Castle Rock, where Robert did nothing and Tywin hit him. Meanwhile, in the Reach, he reports this story while adding how this was also what happened to the Mountain who nearly killed their golden boy, Loras Tyrell, and now Tywin allowed him to raid and seize half the Riverlands. Then, to the Faith, tales of Queen Cersei's excuses, Robert's hand on the realm's purse strings, and the incestuous rumors he's long held in reserve. Lord Eddard Stark stares at the raven scroll in his hand, brow furrowed. He sits alone for a time, until the door creaks open and Robert Baratheon storms in.
They say the Dothraki are stalled. Good. Let them wait. They also say half the lords bicker instead of fight. That they suspect each other more than they fear the Horde. Let them. They'll fall in line when the time comes. They always do. Even they would prefer clenching their teeth and working together than being annihilated. You overestimate the loyalty to the crown. Your authority has weakened in the last few years. The realm is more divided than ever. Ask yourself why they hesitate. The girl Daenerys, you ordered her killed. A pregnant girl. Beyond that, others think that the crown can't protect them. Some say you refuse to enforce justice. She was a dragon, Ned. A threat. So was Rhaegar, but he faced you in open battle. You had no such courage with her.
The silence between them thickens. A log pops in the hearth.
You think me a coward, while you hide behind words? Tell me, is it the lords who are skeptical, or you?
Yes, I do believe the same thing. I wish you had reconsidered. I begged you to reconsider. I said it would bring chaos, and now look what happened.
You think I wanted this? I waited too long. I hesitated, and look where it has gotten us.
You didn't hesitate. You made the right decision, until you decided that it was too difficult. You started a war with a horde of horsemen because you couldn't let go of a dead war.
Robert's hand twitches, as if reaching for a blade that isn't there. Instead, he storms to the table and downs half a goblet of wine. Ned watches him go and sighs. He regrets what he said, but at the same time he cannot deny it either. He stands by it and wishes that this war was all over. Varys' whispers are doing more damage than Dothraki blades. While the enemy camps beyond the Blackwater, it is inside the capital where rot festers faster and within the courts of nobility. And Varys, he watches from behind his many veils, smiling ever so faintly as his web tightens around the realm too proud to notice. The tent is hot with sweat and suspicion, and it spreads all across the countryside. Inside, the lords of the realm gather around a long table marked with scattered stones and sigils. On parchment maps, they represent the strengths of Westeros, but in truth, they are hollowed by distrust. The scent of oil and wax can't mask the tension. In the Riverlands, the Westermen continue to hold the western portion of the region. They continue to offer their aid to protect the people, but they are less welcome.
You're asking the Riverlands to bleed while Lannister men sit comfortably behind their golden gates untouched. Our gold flows to you, while our blood waters the battlefield.
House Lannister guards the western passes. We've sent troops, coins, and grain. Must we spill our blood for every insult you perceive?
You send gold that rightfully belongs to us. It's not perception when you're hoarding the royal purse while the rest of us scramble to arm peasants. You refuse to forgive the debt of the crown, even as your grandson will soon sit the Iron Throne.
My financial policies are not for you to question, little trout.
The storm worsens. The Vale's delegation remains silent, watchful. Lord Nestor Royce, speaking for young Robin Arryn, offers only cold detachment.
The Vale remembers what happened when it marched to war for others. We guard our mountains, not squander our strength for lions and wolves.
And aid in the kidnapping of Lannisters. Tell me, Sir Edmure, the last time a Lannister set foot in your region, he ended up kidnapped. Why should I risk the lives of more men?
If we stand divided, the Dothraki will burn us all. This is no time for old grudges.
But even the north begins to falter. Quiet murmurs from his bannermen. Karstark, Glover, and even Mormont have reached him. They question why their sons march south to die for a king who murders pregnant girls and abandons justice. while they defend the Starks to their final breath, they question why bother going south, even advising him that they do not wish to lose him. Letters are sent to him, urging him to return home. You warned him, Lord Stark. Perhaps it's time you returned home. Let the South fight its own madness. Ned says nothing, but deep inside the question festers. As the Crown's host splinters, the Dothraki advance. Scouts ride ahead of the horde, mapping fertile paths toward the Reach, where rich villages dot the countryside like ripe fruit. There is no unified defense. The Tyrells, wary of being seen as overextending, hold their bannermen close, especially with the Stormlands under threat from Jon Connington. Some like House Rowan and House Fossaway grumble but do not march. The Dothraki, emboldened by their success, raid the fringes and the Reach with terrifying speed. Villages near Golden Grove burn. Horses run down knights in green fields. Grain stores are pillaged. Peasants flee into the woods. At the same time, Jon Connington strikes like a thunderclap, leading a force of exiles and mercenaries to seize Griffin's Roost, his ancestral seat in the name of House Targaryen. The castle garrison is small, caught between surprise and uncertainty. Within a day, the Red Griffin flies once more over the ramparts. Word spreads like fire in dry grass.
The dragon lives. Rhaegar's son has returned.
Some Stormland lords, wary of Robert's rule and drawn out by old loyalties, begin to rally. House Fell sends quiet envoys. Even a few Reach Knights, bitter over Tyrell inaction and distant oaths, ride south to parley with Connington. And from the south, the Dornish banners rise. Bands of Dornishmen slowly stiffen their armies. They swell by hundreds and add their strength to reinforce Jon Connington's broken army. The Martells deny it, but no one believes them. Varys listens to the latest reports in his chambers, a faint smile playing across his lips. In the war room, Robert drinks more, curses louder, and trusts fewer men each day. The council meets, but no longer rules. Decisions stall, orders contradict. Even Ned begins to step back, his eyes turning northward, toward home. And the Dothraki, they march, not unchallenged, but unchained. Ned watches this with growing despair, as he sees the Dothraki riding across the riverlands and into the Reach nearly unchallenged. The only thing that is stopping them are a few guerrillas from the Blackfish, but even these men are now more focused on defending their own lands than organizing a proper counterattack. Down south, things are a bit better, as Renly and Stannis have managed to keep their army together and are now in hot pursuit of Jon Connington, who is slowly reforming his army in Griffin's Roost by recruiting nearby houses and waiting for the Dornish army to reinforce them. Stannis was busy hunting down the remnants of the Dothraki in the Crownlands, but quickly turns his attention south alongside Renly. The two of them are bringing the royal fleet to transport their armies south, and Ned realizes that if they fail to prevent the armies from combining, they can overwhelm the Stormlands. He immediately volunteers to aid them. Robert, though still angry at his hand's harsh words, allows him to go. Robert is left to take command of the city while Ned sends word for the north to mobilize. This time, his letter is firm. They will not abandon the realm, knowing that his men will not refuse a direct order from him. One person pleased to see Ned go is Cersei. She recalls how Ned had confronted her in the woods about the parentage of Joffrey, but so far Ned has held his tongue. It was impossible to bring up with the war going on. More importantly, with the rumors out, it is already causing divisions. But Cersei sees it as an opportunity. She sends Ser Meryn to help, acting as the sworn sword of Ned as he departs the capital. The ship sails to Storm's End, where the army is gathering, but they are struggling to gain more troops from either the Reach or the Stormlands, as many prefer to hold on and protect their own holdings than risk sending out men. Stannis and Renly only have about 15,000 Stormlanders and a few Crownlanders. In contrast, Jon Connington has managed to bring his army up to 12,000, while men from the Reach and Dorne are still coming. If they combine their armies, it will be a disaster and they will not be able to stop them. So they decide to move forward, leaving behind a few hundred men to watch Storm's End, as they push southwest into Crow's Nest to block their path. Stannis quietly organizes the forced march while Renly keeps the royalist forces occupied with a series of lightning strikes. These come at the crack of dawn and continue all throughout the day, hitting Jon Connington and preventing him from properly mobilizing against the rest of the army. This allows Stannis to steal a march and beat them to Crow's Nest, putting them squarely in between Jon and the rest of their forces. But the situation is still precarious, as the Baratheon army is outnumbered and will have a hard fight even if they engage the enemy piecemeal. To that end, Ned tries to organize a counterstrike. He knows that many of the houses in the Reach and Stormlands do not care for Jon Connington. They simply distrust the crown. They will rally to them if they are given reason. As that happens, Ned thinks back to Robert's actions in Stokeworth and how he risked everything to save those people. He feels a pang of guilt at being so hard on the king and realizes the opportunity to win back support. For this, Renly is sent out, as he is the one deemed most gallant and charming. He takes a portion of the army with the instructions to win back the people's support. Soon enough, the young lord goes riding east, not to Dorne, but to the marches in the Reach, to the places suffering from Dornish raids, and there he joins the fight. Many are surprised to see the royals sending someone, much less the youngest Baratheon. But though their army might be small, their aid is welcome. Renly uses this opportunity to begin striking at raiding parties, securing villages, and gathering information. He learns which houses have defected to the Targaryens, and which ones refuse to march out. Renly takes his forces to visit the latter. Many expect to face the fury of the Iron Throne, but Ned selected Renly just for this reason. Rather than punish them, he dines with them and talks about their problems. He does not condemn, but understands. He says he does not blame them and understands their fears. With their enemies and neighbors taking up arms, many would rather choose to defend their homes. He assures them that no one will be punished, but urges them to help him clear out the Dornish raiders. The Bannermen are more than happy to accept this aid, providing their troops to help beat back the nearest raids and clearing out some of the rebel houses. Seeing how understanding Renly is and the aid he brings, their faith in the crown is slowly restored. It doesn't help that Renly is naturally charismatic, chatting and winning over the lordlings and small folks he talks to. Those who cannot fight are given protection by his army, and their villages are slowly retaken. The effort is slow going, but he manages to root out half a dozen rebellious houses while beating back a dozen Dornish raids. Seeing that their attacks are not gaining any momentum, Doran switches tactics and begins to strike in force. Nearly 12,000 Dornishmen march out, not towards the Reach, but towards the marches. This is Renly's signal to return back to Crow's Nest, but to his surprise, many houses offer their aid to him. Seeing their lands more secure thanks to his efforts, they feel more comfortable leaving their homes and bringing their levies to help Stannis. When Renly returns, his army has more than doubled to nearly 10,000 men, and they reinforce Stannis' position. The fog rolls over the hills of the Stormlands like a creeping beast. Beneath the looming towers of Crow's Nest, the war horns sound. Once Renly joins them, they immediately go on the march once again, this time eastward to Griffin's Roost. With the Dornish marching out, they must destroy the Targaryen army before they can link up. Soon they arrive, and the banners of House Connington flap in the rising wind. A red griffin on white, and below it, dozens more. Targaryen loyalists, opportunistic or disillusioned houses, and Dornish allies. 12,000 strong. But before Jon Connington can link his host with the advancing Dornishmen, the king's army moves. Ned Stark, armored in the gray of the north, commands the central assault. Stannis holds the right, unyielding and grim. And leading the vanguard, all banners streaming gold and stag antlers, is Renly Baratheon, his newfound hosts swelling behind him. The three armies move like pincers, descending on Crow's Nest before the two rebel forces can unite.
We strike first. Divide them. Break them before they merge.
Steel meets steel before the morning mist clears. Renly's vanguard charges first, crashing into Connington's outer ranks. Horsemen slam into spearmen, driving them back with sheer momentum. His men are full of purpose, rallied by weeks of slow, careful victories. Behind him move longbowmen boxed in by spearmen to protect them from the Dothraki or elephant charges. They provide support for Renly's troops, showering the enemy with arrows. Connington's troops fight fiercely, but they're spread thin, caught between shock and confusion. He hadn't expected a royal army this large, and certainly not with Renly commanding the charge. While the pride of the Stormland cavalry batters Connington's army, Stannis has footmen circle around and strike the Griffin's flank, cutting through rebel levies. Flames rise, and siege fire catches on tents and wagons. From the center, Ned pushes forward with the infantry, driving into the heart of Connington's line. The chaos of war is everywhere. Screams, war horns, and the clang of steel echoes across the hillside. He keeps some men back to strike at the Dothraki whenever they circle around. Had their enemies been levies, it would have been a sound victory. However, the Golden Company proved to be highly disciplined and hold firm, even as men fall around them. This allows them to barely cling on until the horns sound. The ground trembles. From the south, 12,000 Dornishmen emerge from the trees in perfect formation. At their head rides Oberyn Martell, clad in copper-scaled armor, his spear glinting like fire in the sun. He crashes into the rear like a hammer. Stark men scream and scatter. Chaos ripples through the army.
They've come early.
Ned wheels his horse, turning just in time to meet the Red Viper. The two face off amid smoke and blood. Oberyn's spear twists, already slick with blood. Ned draws his sword.
Lord Stark, I did not expect to see you here, and I regret to see you here as well. You are a good man, Lord Stark. It is a shame that you serve such an unworthy master, but blood can only be paid with blood. You are angry, Prince Oberyn. I understand, and I do not blame you. But do not drown Elia in the blood of the dead, especially not her countrymen. This is no longer about her. This is also about her nephew. Apologies. And no, I take no pleasure in this.
He spurs his horse forward and raises his spear high. Ned barely blocks the attack and sweeps his longsword, though the Red Viper is already moving. Oberyn is quick, too quick for a man in heavy armor. He strikes like lightning, darting in and out with piercing lunges. Ned deflects each blow with ice, but barely. The Northern Lord is a wall of steel and discipline, but Oberyn is fire and rage. Each strike carries the pain of Elia Martell. Each block carries the weight of Ned's duty. But duty only goes so far, as Ned is pushed back by the savagery of the blows. More than one. The only thing that saves him is his armor. The duel rages as the battle unfolds around them. Reachmen and Stormlanders rush to hold the lines, but for a moment, it looks as though the Crown's army will be broken. But then, Renly returns to the field, leading fresh Marcher Lords behind him. House Swan, House Carton, House Selmy. They smash into the Dornish flank. With their home secure, these lords ride with fury, reclaiming the field inch by inch, and with Jon Connington being driven back, they rush to aid Ned Stark. At the same time, Stannis forces Connington into retreat. The Griffin banner falls back, bloodied and scorched.
Renly, with me.
The Baratheon brothers fight shoulder to shoulder, one smiling and radiant, the other grim and relentless. Their men follow, chanting the king's name. Oberyn knocks Ned off balance, landing a shallow cut across his ribs. Thankfully, there is no poison, though Ned clutches his side. Oberyn snarls, but hears the sound of hoofbeats in front of him and sees Stannis and Renly approaching. Oberyn twirls his spear defiantly, prepared to take on all three commanders at once.
No, I will not abandon my nephew. Not to another Baratheon. Then what about a Stark? You have my word that Aegon shall not be harmed. I will personally take care of him and ensure he is treated well. Very well. A Stark it is.
The Red Viper is taken alive, but as Renly and Stannis leave to finish the battle, Ser Meryn appears. Ned is about to comment on how the knight failed to protect him when his sword flashes. Ned barely turns to see it in time, but Oberyn is faster. He whirls forward and grabs a dagger from his belt, driving it into Ser Meryn's eye slit. The knight screams and topples to the ground, but Oberyn casually drops his knife next to him.
I am holding you to your word, Lord Stark.
By sundown, the rebels are shattered. Connington escapes with a handful of retainers to Griffin's Roost, which is soon placed under siege. The Dornish retreat in disorder, their surprise ruined, their prince captured. However, Jon cannot remain hiding forever, and after a short siege, the castle is captured. This is thanks to Oberyn, who convinces the garrison to surrender. True to his word, Ned treats Aegon with all the honors afforded to a prince. This news is a great shock to the rest of the realm. Not only was one of the main commanders of the invasion defeated and the Dornish beaten back, but it is a great display of strength for a crown that had been looking rather frail for the past few years. Robert watches all of this from King's Landing and grits his teeth. He is pleased with this victory, but he also cannot take joy in it. Instead, he feels guilt. Although he was angry at what Ned said, he now begins to see some of the truth in it. He does feel guilt for what happened to Daenerys, and as he receives reports on the carnage happening in the Riverlands, he holds himself responsible for it. He cannot bring himself to remain hiding anymore, and rides out. He leaves the city in command of Sir Balon Swan, while he and Sir Barristan ride out. Robert gathers what followers he can find and rides hard to the Riverlands. The sight that greets him is deplorable, as the region is reduced to smoke and ash. Bands of raiders from both sides roam the countryside, taking anything of value, and Robert is quick to put his foot down here. He sends word to the Riverlords to rally to his banner as he begins this hunt. Where Renly is charming and graceful, Robert is fierce and boisterous. He sweeps his hammer around, crashing the unarmored Dothraki with ease while chasing them down into traps laid out by his Riverlord allies. Now it is their turn to face retreat and ambushes. But Robert doesn't just turn his attention to the Dothraki. He also strikes hard at the rebel houses who find their villages being occupied and their castles seized. Many are killed, such as Sir Raymond, who tries to duel Robert and Lord Rhaegar after trying to ambush him. Not all suffer this fate, as those who surrender under duress are spared, such as Maidenpool. But he doesn't just stop at destruction. Robert works with the River Lords to secure supply lines so aid from down south can come to them. He also tries to shelter the small folk, urging them to flee east, at least temporarily, as he manages to advance east. Seeing the king taking the field, some houses are shamed into acting, and others are forced into it. One such house is Lannister, whom Robert approaches and demands to step up their aid beyond just protecting their buffer zone. When the Northmen arrive and support his claims, the Lannisters are forced to agree. With this army, the Lannisters are brought to heel and forced to march out. They move south to the Reach, where the Dothraki are striking at the fertile lands. The plains of the Reach lie scorched under the hooves of the Dothraki horde. Smoke rises from burning villages, and the once bountiful fields are trampled into the mud. Khal Drogo leads his riders with ruthless efficiency, their swift raids leaving devastation in their wake. Yet the Reach is not defenseless. Lord Mace Tyrell begins rallying his bannermen when he hears that Robert is at last marching to their aid. He establishes a defensive line along the Manda River and tries to halt them from pressing deeper. Utilizing the natural barrier of the river and the discipline of his troops, he manages to halt the Dothraki advance temporarily. While he suffers heavy losses, Mace does hold the line just as Baratheon forces come from the rear. He is leading a combined force of Baratheon, Stark, and Lannister troops. The king, clad in full plate armor and wielding his massive warhammer, takes command. Robert orders his forces into a shield wall formation. The soldiers interlock their shields, creating an unbroken line of defense. These are organized in a crest formation. Behind this wall, archers and horsemen prepare to repel the inevitable assault. The Dothraki, confident in their mobility and archery skills, launch wave after wave of attacks. Arrows rain down upon the shield wall. Many fall before the storm, some pinned to their shields and others finding chinks in their armor. Robert orders his men to ignore these losses and to hold firm. The king rides up and down the defenses, waving his hammer around and even takes arrows on the shoulder. The sight of the king putting his life at risk and joining them rallies the people. The disciplined formation holds firm, absorbing the onslaught. The Dothraki attempt feigned retreats and flanking maneuvers, but the Westerosi forces, under Robert's command, do not break formation. The Dothraki and their infantry come rushing forward, barreling forward to try and break formation. Their lines crash, and the front becomes a sea of death as Dothraki are pulled from their horses and hacked down, while others manage to slash infantry with their blades. Robert seizes opportunity. He orders a countercharge. The shield wall opens, and the heavy cavalry led by Robert himself crashes into the disorganized Dothraki ranks. The sudden and forceful assault shatters the horde's cohesion. In the midst of the chaos, Robert spots Khal Drogo. The warlord is rallying his men, cutting down those who retreat, but soon spots Robert. A smile forms on his lip as he calls for his sword and rushes at him. The two leaders engage in a brutal duel, their weapons clashing with ferocious intensity. Robert sweeps his hammer, and yet Khal Drogo slides under the attack before lunging with his Arak. Though this leaves only a scratch. Drogo's speed and agility allow him to land several blows, but Robert's armor absorbs the damage. With a mighty swing of his warhammer, he nearly takes Drogo's head, but it's avoided, and instead Drogo reaches for his whip and coils it around Robert's arm. He then yanks it hard and pulls Robert from his horse. Drogo is about to drag him through the dirt, but Sir Barristan rushes forward and slashes it. Barristan helps Robert to his feet just as Ser Jorah and Drogo's blood riders emerge. Robert picks up his hammer and leaps into the fray once more. The first blood rider falls before his hammer, while Jorah rushes to face him. Sir Barristan, meanwhile, cuts down the other two.
You will pay for what you did, usurper. Big talk from a man who rode beside me. From a slaver. I did what I had to do. You did what you did to get a woman. Believe me, I know.
Jorah roars and rushes at him, longsword flashing, but he fails to break through Robert's defenses.
Better an exile than a disgrace and a murderer. A murderer of children. And don't forget how I got that information. Don't think Varys told me about your letters to him, do you?
Jorah's anger flashes, but Robert sweeps his hammer and crushes his skull. Meanwhile, Sir Barristan continues to duel with Drogo, who moves faster and more agile than his blood riders. The two trade blows, but Sir Barristan struggles to get close, until Robert smashes his leg underneath the call and sends him toppling. Robert looks over at the call one more time and shakes his head. His hammer twitches in his hand, but he instead orders Barristan to guard him. With the call defeated, his Khalasar breaks and scatters in the wind. By the time Drogo is brought before Robert, his braid has been cut off and he kneels defeated. An interpreter listens to Drogo's words as he simply asks why.
Because I know what it's like to lose the woman you love. I know the depths it can drag a man. And now, I suppose I know how Rhaegar felt. I'll allow you the chance to leave. Lead your forces back across the narrow sea, and never return.
Drogo laughs and says that the Khalasar will never follow a man who was defeated like him. Instead, he simply asks to die like a warrior, something Robert obliges him with. With the war over, him and Ned return to King's Landing. In contrast to their chilly departure, the reunion is warm as the two embrace and offer apologies for their words. Both are surprised to hear what the other had done about their prisoners, but neither blames the other. Instead, both focus on righting the wrongs in the realm. With the incest now in the open, Cersei is arrested and Jaime is stripped of his titles and forced to the wall after Robert pressures Tywin. Meanwhile, the remains of the Khalasar and the Golden Company prove to be trouble, but Robert and Ned dedicate themselves to hunting them down. Meanwhile, Aegon is sent to foster in Dragonstone under the watchful eye of Stannis. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.